Is it too early to give up on him?
Yes, of course it is. It like the backlash towards Wiseman has been ridiculous. Like, I understand that he came in and disappointed as a rookie. I get it. But look, no, of course he's going to get better.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 460 of the NBA podcast. I'm Bryan Toporek, and we are going to continue our division-by-division preview of the 21-22 season with the Pacific Division today. We are closing out the Western Conference, so we will tackle all of the biggest questions for the Golden State Warriors, Los Angeles Clippers, Los Angeles Lakers, Phoenix Suns, and the Sacramento Kings. Before we get into that, a reminder that you can follow us on Twitter at the NBA Pod. You can find our Twitter handles in our bio, so give us a follow as well. You can also find us on iTunes and wherever else podcasts are found. On iTunes, please subscribe, download, leave some 5-star reviews. And we're being hosted by Spreaker, so check them out on Twitter at Spreaker. Joining me today, as always, is someone who I know is excited to talk about Russell Westbrook, Morten Jensen. How's it going?
It's going well. I actually am. For once, I don't mind it. Like, I'll admit right off the bat that I don't have the Lakers at the top of my League Pass rankings, for example. But that does not mean that they aren't in for an interesting year. If nothing else, there's a lot of potential for this thing to go completely nuclear in whichever direction. So I'm definitely down to talk about Russ.
Good. Well, we'll save the Lakers for a bit.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about them this offseason for obvious reasons. Let's actually start with the Golden State Warriors, Mort.
Yeah.
And the first question we have to hit is Klay Thompson, who we have not seen play basketball in more than 2 calendar years at this point.
Yeah.
He gets hurt during the 2019 finals. He tears the ACL. He comes back. He misses the entire 2019-20 season. We think he's coming back for 2021, and then he tears his Achilles. So now he's coming off of 2 major injuries. You know, we're starting to see Klay in the gym again. Videos are popping up. He seems like he will be ready to go by the time the 21-22 season tips off. What do you think are reasonable expectations for him this year?
I think the jump shot is going to stick around. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. I mean, look, the mechanics are just so damn solid, and he's not a guy who leaves the ground a whole lot. Like, he can basically tiptoe his way to 100 made 3-point shots in a season pretty easily. So that's not going anywhere. I think the bigger question for me is, what can he do defensively now? He was always a very, very good defender, especially just in terms of team schemes and like moving about, lateral quickness. After 2 major injuries like this, I wonder if he lost a bit of his speed. Also, taking into account that he got a little bit older, like 2 years is nothing to sneeze at. And I think he's over 30, right? Or this is the year. Yeah,
he's 31.
Yeah. So I don't think that's going to help the situation any. For me, I just want to see him come out and play to the same extent that he used to be able to offensively. Just be a spot-up guy and hit those ridiculous, what is it per year? 229 threes per year, or whatever it was he's averaging. Like, I just want to see the shooting. I want to see him come in and be a reliable offensive threat in that regard. And if he can be a plus defensively, that's great. But I am arming myself with patience. I don't think it's fair to put prime Klay Thompson expectations upon him right now, not after 2 years. And I think load management is going to be a key subject for him moving forward, especially this year as he eases his back way into the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, he averaged around 34 minutes per game each of his last 4 healthy years. Yeah. I'd be surprised if they start him off playing 30 plus, 35 minutes a game right away. I think he'll probably ease his way back in. I do think he's going to start. I think he will start games, he will close games, and they'll piece things together in the middle with some of their younger guys like Jordan Poole or Moses Moody. But I think you're spot on. Like, the shot should be fine. It's not like he was, these are devastating injuries, of course, but we just saw Kevin Durant come back from an Achilles injury and look like his prime self still. So I know he's the outlier, and that Achilles injuries typically are very bad news for, injury and post-injury, what their career trajectories look like. But Klay was never really reliant on his athleticism. It's not as devastating for him as it was for John Wall, for instance. And even John Wall looked pretty good last year coming off of that injury. So
Rudy Gay too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the jump shot should be there. I think you're spot on there. And honestly, for a guy who is as efficient as Klay is, he has never had a season where he shot below 40% from three-point range, which is just absurd.
Mm-hmm.
You could even see his shot profile shifting more toward threes. Like, he's never had a season where he shot more than 8.3 per game. Like,
which seems low, honestly.
Right? Like, I could absolutely see him just jacking up 9 or 10 a game this year.
Yeah.
And I think they'd be better off for it. I mean, they've missed his spacing element so much in these last couple of years, where you just cannot leave this guy alone. And it's not even, you can't leave him alone like 23 feet from the basket. You can't leave him alone 26, 27 feet.
Yeah.
Like, just putting him opposite of Stephen Curry stretches defenses to their breaking point. So even if he's not prime Klay and he's more of a decoy than he has been in past years, his presence on the floor alone is going to change the way that teams get to guard the Warriors, Steph in particular. And then I wonder what it means for James Wiseman too. Because if you have these two guys out on the perimeter who you have to guard 25, 30 feet away from the basket, that's just not going to leave as many defenders in that, toward the paint where Wiseman's going to operate. So let's go right to Wiseman, because he was the big story for them last year, the number 2 pick of the 2020 draft. I think it's fair to say he had an up and down rookie season. He only started 27 of his 39 games. The Warriors, this is from Basketball Reference, they were a minus 10.2 per 100 possessions with him on the court. So what are your expectations for Wiseman heading into year 2? And do you think, like, a lot of people were writing him off already and are just like, well, they totally effed up. They should have picked LaMelo. This guy's a bust. Do you think there's a chance that he turns his career around or builds upon what he did as a rookie? Like, is it too early to give up on him?
Yes, of course it is. It like the backlash towards Wiseman has been ridiculous. Like, I understand that he came in and disappointed as a rookie. I get it. But look, no, of course he's going to get better. Are you kidding me? It's such a ridiculous ideology that after 1 year, a guy is just not going to be anything. Over the first couple of games, he showed that he could hit threes. He showed that he could pick the ball up at full court and actually handle it pretty well for someone who's 7 feet tall. Obviously, there's a shot blocking component. Obviously, there's a very athletic component to his game as well. Like, why are we looking at that going, well, that's somehow irrelevant because he can't get better? Like, it's dumb. But that said, I just don't understand why we're discussing James Wiseman when we're supposed to talk about the Golden State Warriors, because he's not going to be a part of that team for a whole lot longer.
Ooh, that's interesting. Well, I mean, so that also
means we shouldn't talk about Kuminga or Moody, by the way.
Who do you think they're going to trade these guys for?
I'm obviously only joking a little bit here because I think that they aren't long for this team, because why would you not try to go all in? We just talked about Klay. I think it really comes down to how he looks. If he looks to be almost like all Klay, and you have Steph and you have Draymond who are all clicking, why wouldn't you? Oh, and Andrew Wiggins too as well, of course. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you want to kind of cash in on the young guys and go for someone who's an in-prime star or a couple high-end starters at the very least? You would, if you don't, you kind of waste the last couple of years of Steph and Klay. So, and Dre, why wouldn't you do that? So I'm looking at 2 teams in particular. Okay. And look, this one fan base is going to come at me every time I propose this, and it's fine. Yeah. But it makes sense. Like, if the Raptors are just bad, look, maybe there's a Siakam trade there. Yep. Maybe there is. Like, I'm not trying to take Pascal Siakam out of Toronto. Like, if they find success, which they could, it's still a very talented team. Go for it. That's great. But if you find yourself in that situation, if you're the Raptors, where you're kind of struggling, you can't really get a level of consistency in terms of the on-court product, you want to pivot to more youth, then this package in Golden State with spearheaded by Wiseman, Kuminga, and Moody, and maybe even Jordan Poole as well, like, that's interesting, right? Like that's not a bad youth package to get in return. And should some other team find themselves winning virtually no games, and should that team be the Minnesota Timberwolves, Karl Anthony Towns could be an interesting piece right there. So obviously they would need to include Kevon Looney in this deal to make the salaries work, and like there are a couple components that needs to work. But I think the Warriors right now are going into this season saying, okay, we're going to break this year into two halves. One where we just really try to get Klay back into the swing of things, and where we give the kids a lot of minutes to see what they can do. Because if one of them pops a little bit, that's going to enhance that guy's trade value. If two pops, maybe he look all the better. Then there's a better argument to pivot away from them for Siakam or Towns or whoever. But that would be, to me, the priority here. And I think obviously Towns would be a major priority, because look, what kind of ridiculous team would that be? Steph, Klay, Wiggins, Dre, and Towns? Good Lord. I mean,
well, they'd probably have to send Wiggins for the salary.
That's the thing. I don't think they do. I don't think
really.
They do. Yeah, I was looking at it the other day, and I'm pretty sure that if it's the trio of young players plus Kevon Looney and Jordan Poole, then they would have to take back minimum deals or some capacity of non-guaranteed deals or whatever from Minnesota. I'm fairly sure it works.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we could relook. We could kind of explore it at one point. I might be off. You're better at this stuff than I am, but I'm pretty sure that they can finagle it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, either way, I don't think that package is going to win the bidding. If Karl Anthony Towns does get on the market, I think other teams could very easily outbid the Warriors. Again, this is if someone pops. Very important. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, it comes down to, we've talked about this with Boston in past years, where they had, the Kyrie, Horford, Hayward, like win now group. And then they had the two Jays who were like, these are going to be our next era, and we're going to bring them along and get them the good playoff experience now, so they're ready to take over. And, Boston did not tread that line well, and ended up losing most of those guys for nothing. And now, the Jays are going to be that next half decade. The Boston Celtics are theoretically built around these two guys. The Warriors are in a similar boat, where you have, Steph, Klay, Dre, you bring Andre Iguodala back. Andre Iguodala did not sign with that team as part of a 3-year plan, right? He's back to end his career there because of what he did 5 years ago with them. But he's got 1 or 2 years left probably, and then he's out of here.
Yeah.
But they also have this young core. And I think what I like about what Golden State did this offseason, there were rumors leading up to the draft. They were trying to package Wiseman and the 2 picks to get a star of some capacity, whether it's Ben Simmons, Siakam, Bradley Beal, Dame, if he had requested a trade. None of that has materialized yet, but now they have, to steal Daryl Morey's favorite term, optionality. As you said, if one of these young guys, if Wiseman comes in year 2 and is substantially improved and he raises his trade value around the league, now we could start talking about, okay, maybe if I'm Toronto. And I saw a quote from Masai Ujiri yesterday who said, we're not built to win now. So he's got that perspective in mind of maybe he is open to a Siakam trade, especially after taking Scotty Barnes at number 4. You could pretty easily talk yourself into, if we can get Wiseman and these 2 kids and future picks, and Barnes, Wiseman is our front court of the future. Yeah. That makes more sense than a 27-year-old Siakam and then Barnes who plays the same position. So I think that's a good shout to keep an eye on a potential Warriors Raptors deal. But I mean, Kuminga and Moody too. We'll see how much playing time they get early in the season. And I mean, I think it'll be a decent amount. They bring in Otto Porter Jr., which I think is a really that's going to fly under the radar compared to what all like the Nets and the Lakers did this offseason.
And Nemanja Bjelica too.
Well, I'm specifically on Porter because if he stays healthy, he's going to be such a good fit in this Warriors system. And if they end up having to trade Wiggins as part of salary, the salary matching component for a trade, now you can just slide in Otto Porter Jr. at the 3-4, and you're not like, I don't think he's that big of a downgrade.
Well, I mean, he needs to be healthy, Brian.
Right,
I mean,
right.
That's the one thing.
Healthy.
And two, he got large. And as a large person myself, I shouldn't talk, but he got heavy and he got worse. He is significantly less agile now. So look, it really comes down to what kind of shape he's going to go into training camp with. If he's going to be the Otto Porter that the Bulls traded for, like, okay, then I would actually say that Otto Porter and that version of Otto Porter is better than Andrew Wiggins. Like, that's not even a downgrade, that's an upgrade. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he couldn't even stay healthy. The Bulls had him for 2 years and he played 54 games.
Yeah.
He played 3 games for the Magic. 3.
I would guess being on, that Magic team was horrible. And
that's
the Bulls team wasn't much better. Like, he has motivation now to get in shape because he thinks like, oh, okay, I'm actually going to be playing for something meaningful this year. And there were reports that came out or quotes that came out earlier this year where he said he's got like he used that time with Orlando to kind of get his body right. And he actually says, now it's this is the time of year where everyone is optimistic about how their body is, but he says he's feeling better and should be in better shape than he was the last couple of years. But regardless, like I even if it's a downgrade, it's not a substantial one if he stays healthy. Right. So now you can, you just have more flexibility if you end up trading some of these kids this year. So like the Warriors are going to be such an interesting team, both, for the on-court reasons, because if you've got 4/5 of the death lineup back, and then, plug in Wiggins, plug in Porter, either one, like in theory, this could be the same terrifying Warriors team that dominated the latter half of the 2010s. But you also have this next generation and seeing how much playing time they get, what they do with these guys, if they keep them, if they trade them. The Warriors are going to be a fixture of every national media outlet, including us. As much as we all got some Warriors fatigue during that dynasty run, hopefully the last 2 years off gave us all a nice, we got to have our system for a bit, but they're going to be right back in the forefront of everyone's mind this year.
I would agree. But I just want to say, don't sleep on Bjelica. He had a bad year, but outside of that, he's good. Like, he is significantly underrated. And I think those signings were made to also, like you kind of said, if they're going to pivot away from the kids. Like, it seems like the breadcrumbs have been laid down. Now, again, I need to double check whether that specific Minnesota package could be swung without Wiggins, but I do think that Wiggins overall is going to be prioritized because they need his athleticism. They're getting older, and they need a guy who's still in his prime, which Wiggins is. He's only 26. Who can actually jump. Don't have a lot of guys right now, otherwise, who can really jump.
That's true.